Welcome to the deep dive. Today you're joining us as we unpack the historical and archaeological significance of two really fascinating locations, Bet Shemesh and the Ellah Valley.
Hmm.
Our mission, well, it's simple. Extract the most compelling nuggets of knowledge from our sources and sort of offer you a shortcut to understanding these pivotal places and the, captivating stories woven into their history.
Exactly. And we have a really interesting set of observations and commentary to explore. These were actually recorded just last May 2024 during recent visits.
Oh, very recent then.
Yeah, so we're getting a blend of established historical context with some fresh, on-the-ground perspectives, just for you, the listener.
Great, great. Let's dive right into Bet Shemesh then. Our material begins with, well, a somewhat disheartening note mentioning a past significant archaeological dig near Bet Shemesh that was quite regrettably destroyed to make way for road construction.
Yeah, that's always tough to hear.
It really brings to the forefront this ongoing tension, doesn't it, between like the need for development and preserving our past. What specific kinds of artifacts or, information might have been lost there? And what are the broader ethical thoughts on balancing development versus preservation?
It certainly underscores the difficult decisions sometimes made and the potential impact. While the specifics of that particular loss aren't detailed here, the destruction of any archaeological site can mean the permanent loss of artifacts, architecture, the context.
Right, how things relate.
Exactly, all crucial for piecing together the past. But what's particularly striking is that despite this setback, the commentary quickly moves to the enduring archaeological importance of the biblical village of Bet Shemesh itself.
Yes, and this is where it gets really intriguing. Archaeologists have identified a very clear destruction layer there, dating to the 7th or 8th century BCE, the likely cause, the Assyrian conquest.
That fits the timeline.
But what's fascinating is that the story doesn't end with destruction, does it?
Not at all. What's remarkable is the resilience of this place. Bet Shemesh wasn't abandoned. It was rebuilt and actually thrived, becoming a substantial regional center after the Assyrian conquest.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and this lasted until the Babylonian conquest, 7th to 6th centuries BCE. So for about a century, maybe a bit more, Bet Shemesh experienced this period of significant growth and importance.
Why do you think it rebounded so strongly after such a, major hit? Does that tell us something about its importance or maybe the Assyrian approach?
That's a great question. Perhaps its strategic location, maybe its agricultural base allowed for that resurgence. Hard to say for sure. Now, the name Big Shemesh itself, it has some ancient roots, doesn't it? There's a theory about its Canaanite origins.
Right, House of the Sun.
That's correct. The prevailing idea is that the name is connected to sun worship. This was common for Canaanite worship sites, often strategically placed on geographical boundaries.
Oh, okay.
And Bet Shemesh fits perfectly, right on the border between the Judean hills and the lower Shephelah terrain.
So a natural meeting point, geographically and, well, possibly spiritually. And our source mentions something interesting. The Israelites kept using this name, didn't they? Even with its potential, idolatrous connections.
What's particularly insightful here is this element of pragmatism. The continued use of local names, even those with potentially pagan origins, suggests how deeply ingrained these geographical terms were. It's a bit like, how we still use secular years today, a practical convenience that kind of overrides potential ideological concerns. It just shows how everyday life often finds a way to coexist with larger belief systems.
That's a really helpful parallel. Now, shifting focus a bit, our source then brings in a very moving historical event connected to this same valley, the story of the Lamed Hay, the 35 soldiers in 1948.
This is a powerful connection linking the ancient past with more recent history. These soldiers were trying to break the siege on Gush Etzion, setting out on foot from Hartuv.
Right near Bet Shemesh.
Exactly. And the commentary emphasizes that the very valley we're discussing, the landscape around Bet Shemesh, is the path they walked. It really reminds us this land has been a stage for significant moments throughout history.
It truly grounds these events in a tangible place. We learn about their late departure, the awful injury just across the Sorek River, reducing their numbers from 38 to 35.
Yeah, those human details.
Played out right there in the same space we're exploring for its much older past.
It adds another layer, doesn't it, to the rich tapestry of this area. Shows how this landscape witnessed pivotal events across different eras.
And speaking of the ancient past, the commentary then points us to a distant view of Tel Yarmouth, This sounds incredibly significant.
Oh, it is. Tel Yarmuth is described as an extraordinary early Bronze Age palace, predating Abraham by over 1,000 years.
Wow. 1,000 years before Abraham.
Yeah. Excavated by the Italian archaeologist Miro Shoji. The discoveries there are, well, truly remarkable. The idea of a palace that old. It's mind-boggling. What kinds of societal structures or, technology would they have needed back then for such a construction?
Remarkable feels like an understatement, especially with the mystery around its inhabitants. They're just called Canaanites, right? Kind of a default term.
Exactly, for lack of a more precise term. It highlights just how much we still don't know about these early peoples. Their language,
Hmm?
unknown. Even their ancient name for the site, Cat Give Dalet.
Cat give Dalet. What does that mean?
We don't know. It has such an enigmatic quality. But the fact they had a distinct name underscores their established civilization, the long history here. The commentary also poignantly contrasts the area's past natural beauty with current development, a theme we touched on.
Right, that tension again.
A powerful reminder of the layers of history, sometimes clashing with the present.
It truly is. Following this glimpse into the deep past, the discussion turns to more recent archaeological work, specifically surveys. For those of us not archaeologists, how do these surveys differ from a full dig?
Absolutely. An archaeological survey, as described here, involves a team systematically walking across the landscape, often quite close together.
Like arm's length.
Yeah, something like that. Documenting any non-natural finds on the surface, pottery sherds, carved stones. They might collect a few small samples, but there's no significant digging. It's more about identifying areas with potential that might warrant more intensive excavation later.
Okay, like a reconnaissance mission.
Exactly, a broad look to pinpoint potential hotspots.
That makes sense. Getting the lay of the land, archaeologically speaking. And this particular survey by Yusuf Garfinkel's team, it uncovered some interesting stuff about later history.
It did. The survey identified traces of wine presses, mikvahot, those are ritual baths,
Right.
and possible synagogues and churches. This suggests the diverse agricultural and religious activities happening here across various periods.
It paints a picture of a dynamic, changing landscape. And then we get to a pivotal moment, the 2006 discovery by Sargon North, the Antiquities Authority Ranger. This sounds like the catalyst for more in-depth work.
Precisely. That discovery was clearly a turning point. It prompted further research. He collaborated with Professor Yosef Garfinkel, who, interestingly, had initially focused on prehistoric archaeology.
Oh, interesting switch.
Yeah. This collaboration led to excavations from 2007, 2008 through 2001, 2015. The commentary even includes first-hand accounts of witnessing these digs in 2009 and 2013.
Oh, cool. A personal touch.
Yeah, adds a personal dimension. It's fascinating how one observant person can spark such a wealth of new understanding.
It really is. Now, as we continue our journey through this landscape, the commentary notes the proximity of Tel Azekah to Tel Yarmuth, as seen from our vantage point. What does their closeness suggest?
Well, from near Bet Shemesh, you can see they're quite close. This just highlights the concentration of ancient settlements in this specific area,
Not just isolated spots.
right? They were part of a broader network, likely interacting, influencing each other over long periods. It really underscores the long, rich history of human activity in this valley.
It certainly does. And finally, before we move focus to Tel Azekah itself, the commentary mentions crossing the Ellah River and the significance of its rounded stones. Of course, this immediately brings to mind.
David and Goliath.
Exactly.
It does indeed. The Ellah River, with its distinctive rounded stones, is famously linked to the biblical account of David picking up 5 such stones before facing Goliath.
Right.
Being there, seeing those stones, it creates a more tangible connection to that legendary story. It invites you to imagine that spot as potentially where David prepared.
A powerful image. Okay, let's now turn our attention to Tel Azekah itself and the central setting for the David and Goliath narrative. Our source material mentions recent excavations on the summit, but also notes earlier digs by McAllister that had a big impact.
Yes, that's a common challenge in archaeology.
Yeah.
Earlier excavations, often with less precise methods, can sometimes limit later research.
Oh, so
Well, the commentary points out, McAllister's work restricted where subsequent archaeologists could dig right at the top, where a significant structure, maybe a tower, might have stood.
Oh,
That
okay,
it
wow.
potentially reused even up to the Crusader period. It's a reminder that sites are finite and past techniques can have lasting consequences.
It certainly underscores the need for careful, methodical work now. Interestingly, Tel Azekah also yielded evidence from much later, Bar Kokhba period underground tunnels. For those unfamiliar, could you briefly explain that revolt and why tunnels were important then?
Certainly, the Bar Kokhba revolt was a major Jewish uprising against Roman rule, 2nd century CE. These tunnels were extensive networks used by rebels for shelter, communication, hiding from the Romans.
Wow.
The fact they were found at Tel Azekah shows the site's continued strategic importance centuries after the biblical period. However, as the commentary mentions, they're unfortunately closed to the public now. Safety concerns, length, size, cost of maintenance.
Oh, that's a shame. Would have been
It
fascinating.
really would have. A glimpse into that later resistance.
So, Tel Azekah holds layers of history. But as we discussed, the main reason we're focusing here today is David and Goliath. However, the commentary is quick to point out the battle didn't actually happen on Tel Azekah.
That's correct. Tel Azekah's strategic significance here is its commanding view of the Ellah Valley below. From up there, you get the best perspective to truly understand the geopolitical context of the conflict.
And that context is so important, isn't it? The commentary reminds us of Philistine dominance at the time, stretching north to south, and the sort of disarray among the Israelite tribes before Saul. His initial efforts were focused on pushing back against them.
Precisely. Saul's reign was an initial attempt to unite the fragmented tribes and resist that encroaching Philistine power. The commentary then touches upon a seemingly contradictory passage in 1 Samuel 13 about Saul's age and reign length.
Ah, yes, the one-year-old king who reigned 2 years. That one always raises eyebrows.
It does. The commentary offers a couple of potential explanations. One is the rabbinic view. Saul was considered pure from sin, like a newborn when anointed. A theological take.
Right.
But the commentary also explores more textual possibilities. What are your thoughts on errors just creeping into ancient texts over time? Seems almost inevitable, right?
Oh, absolutely. Manual copying over centuries. Mistakes are bound to happen. And these textual explanations are quite interesting, involving potential scribal errors with ancient number symbols. How might those have been misread?
Certainly. The idea is that the original written symbols for numbers could have been quite similar, easily misread or miscopied.
Mhm.
The commentary suggests maybe a symbol for, say, 20 or 22 was mistaken for a single letter and just dropped by a later scribe.
Ah, okay.
Or if a 2 was really there, maybe it was part of a larger number, like 22 or 32. Either would make more chronological sense for a king's reign. It really highlights the challenges of working with ancient texts, how small errors can have big implications.
It certainly does. But despite that ambiguity about his reign length, the commentary stresses Saul's accomplishments.
Absolutely. The source material highlights his success in unifying the tribes. Even members of Judah's main family were fighting in his army.
Right.
Plus, he made significant efforts to stamp out idol worship and sorcery.
The example given, the Witch of Endor, being afraid of his enforcers way up in the Jezebel Valley, really shows the scope of his efforts there. So despite his eventual tragic end, the commentary portrays Saul as, initially at least, an effective and transformative ruler.
Precisely. This gives us the context for the Elah Valley battle. The commentary then guides us through 1 Samuel 17, visualizing the troop deployments.
Okay, so the Philistines massed at Soho of Judah, camped at Ephes Dammim between Soho and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites were in the valley of Elah. The commentary points out that grasping the descriptions, valley versus hills really needs you to be there.
That's a crucial observation. Standing on Tel Azekah, you realize the armies were on the ridges overlooking the valley floor. The Philistines, heavier equipment, probably lower down, along the edges stretching from Azekah towards Soho, which you can see in the distance, Tel Soho.
I see.
The whole setup is almost like a natural amphitheater, with the Philistines along the lower slopes.
That visual really clarifies the text. And what about Ephes Dammim? The commentary mentions some uncertainty there.
Yes, the meaning is debated. It could be a specific place name, or, quite interestingly, it might be descriptive related to battle readiness. Maybe something like boundary of blood or places of bloodshed showing they were ready for a fight.
That's a compelling alternative. Now, the central drama, David and Goliath. The commentary explains the actual battleground was in the valley, the space between the armies where they could hear each other's taunts.
Exactly. Geographically, the likely spots are narrowed down to opposite either Tel Azekah or Tel Soho. The commentary notes either is plausible, tour guides might emphasize one or the other depending on where they are. The key is it happened somewhere in that central part of the valley.
And then David arrives. Not a warrior, but a shepherd bringing supplies to his brothers. Such a stark contrast.
It is. And his motivation wasn't military ambition, but faith. Outrage at Goliath defying the Israelites and their God. The commentary underscores David's powerful response, grounded in that unwavering faith.
The commentary also highlights the symbolic significance of Saul's garment, his armor. That seems important for the wider narrative in Samuel.
Absolutely. Clothing, armor, potent symbols of kingdom, status, identity in the text. When David tries Saul's armor, it's cumbersome, ill-fitting. It physically shows he can't operate within Saul's way of leadership.
Right.
His choice to use his shepherd's tool staff, 5 smooth stones from the Ellah River, emphasizes reliance on his own skills and, crucially, his trust in divine protection.
A powerful image, David embracing his own identity,
Yeah.
trusting his unique abilities, and then the confrontation.
Goliath scorns David's youth, lack of armor. But David responds with that powerful declaration of faith. His strength comes from somewhere else entirely. The commentary recounts the moment. David strikes Goliath with a single sling stone, fells the giant.
And then uses Goliath's own sword.
Exactly. Lacking his own, he uses Goliath's weapon to kill him, sever his head. Dramatic, decisive.
A stunning victory leading to the Philistine rout. However, the commentary then brings up a slightly perplexing point. The final chapter of Samuel seems to say someone else killed Goliath. How do we reconcile that?
This discrepancy suggests the David and Goliath story might serve a broader literary theological purpose. The commentary proposes the main aim is highlighting David's character, his courage, faith, belief, especially contrasted with Saul's hesitation.
So the message is key.
Right. Regardless of the precise details later, the core message is David confronting the giant, triumphing through faith.
Okay, the symbolic power takes precedence over strict historical detail in every instance. This brings us back to Saul, his selection, his downfall. The commentary reiterates he was initially capable, uniting tribes, fighting enemies.
That's correct. But the fundamental issue, according to the commentary, was the people wanting a kingship like all the nations around them, focused on outward power, military might, not strict adherence to God's will. This inherent desire, maybe reflected in Saul too, meant he was, in a sense, doomed from the beginning, despite early successes. The commentary hints his actions at the Battle of Ajalon were a key deviation.
Raises profound questions about leadership, doesn't it? What makes for effective rule? Despite his failure, the commentary emphasizes the enduring significance of these stories.
These biblical narratives, as highlighted, are foundational to Western and Jewish culture, resonating with various groups globally. They explore timeless themes: faith, courage, leadership, consequences.
And finally, our deep dive concludes with a tantalizing tease about Tel Azekah, also known as Tribbet Caiaphas. This discovery has apparently significantly reshaped our understanding of this period.
Yes, the commentary suggests findings at Tel Azekah have challenged previous assumptions about the Elah Valley in David and Saul's time. It points towards perhaps a more developed, maybe earlier emergence of Israelite identity and statehood than previously thought.
Oh,
It
intriguing.
definitely sets the stage for a future deep dive into that site and its implications, a missing piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely. So, to summarize our exploration today, you've seen the remarkable interconnectedness of Bet Shemesh and the Ellah Valley. From ancient Canaanite worship to David and Goliath, this land holds layers upon layers of history. The blend of archaeology and biblical narrative gives us a truly rich, multifaceted understanding.
And on that note, we leave you with a final thought. Consider how new discoveries, like at Tel Azekah, can fundamentally alter our understanding of even well-known stories. This ongoing process encourages reflection on the dynamic nature of knowledge.
Right.
What other seemingly settled accounts might be challenged by future findings? It's a continuous journey, and the stories we tell about the past are always subject to new evidence, evolving perspectives.